Freakonomics.
You've been given a great gift, George. A chance to see what the world would be like without you.
What I believe to be true, and I think the evidence supports it, is a hypothesis which many people find jarring and disturbing, but nonetheless I believe is probably right.
Good evening. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions.
In 1973, in a case called Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court ruled that abortion, which had previously been legal in only 5 U.S. states, would now be legal nationwide. Precisely the opposite of what happened in Romania.
The legalization of abortion in the 1970s was one of the primary reasons why crime fell in the 1990s, because a whole generation of potentially unwanted children were never born because of the legalization of abortion. And if you fast forward 20 years to the point in time when they were going to be at their peak crime ages, they simply weren't there to do the crime.
You see, George, you really had a wonderful life. Don't you see what a mistake it would be to throw it away?
The trouble, of course, is that life isn't like the movies. For so many children who, without Roe v. Wade, would have been born in 1973, their lives might not have been the wonderful lives of being born into a loving family in yesterday's small-town America. Rather, theirs would be the far harder road of being born into a potentially unwanting household in America's crumbling inner cities or forsaken heartland. Levitt's conclusion? As much as half of the 1990s crime drop was an unintended consequence of Roe v. Wade.
The theory behind it is actually quite simple. Unwanted children have been shown to be at high risk for crime. With legalized abortion, fewer unwanted children were born. Therefore, the theory would be that there would be less crime 15 to 20 years later when those cohorts reach their peak crime ages. And the data support that hypothesis quite strongly. If you follow the data, there were 5 states that legalized abortion 3 years before Roe versus Wade, and about 15 years later, their crime begins to fall 3 years before the rest of the country. Then, if you look at the states where abortion was not just legal, but easily available to people who wanted to get them, 16, 17 years after Roe versus Wade, you see a 30% difference between the states doing a lot of abortions and the ones who are doing very few. Finally, all of the effect we see in the divergence in crime, all of that is concentrated among people under the age of 25, people young enough to have been exposed to legalized abortion. People older than the age of 25, there's no difference whatsoever between the high abortion states and the low abortion states. And I think in some ways that's the best evidence we have that legalized abortion is responsible for a big chunk of the decline in crime.
Levitt's controversial theory has provoked strong reaction among critics. Is he, for example, advocating abortion as a crime-fighting tool?
In no way would I take this as advocacy in favor of legalized abortion. I don't think anyone's opinion about whether abortion should be legal or not should be affected by our result.
Some of Levitt's critics suggest that his theory holds what might appear to be class or racial implications. He argues, though, that race and class have nothing to do with the matter, that his theory targets no specific group other than mothers-to-be of all backgrounds. And since, as Levitt points out, women who elect to abort go on to become childbearers consistent with the general population, Levitt's argument could thus be understood to suggest that legalized abortion does not so much prevent birth as delay it. This turns an unwanted birth by a too young mother, for example, into a wanted birth by that mother when she feels more ready. So, if Levitt is not advocating abortion as a crime-fighting tool, what is he advocating? Well, whether one is pro-life or pro-choice or somewhere in between, there is a meaningful and to date unimpeached connection between giving women the right to choose and a reduction in crime.